love to travel together. I'm excited to. I'd now like to turn to our second panel, starting with Mr. Mavinga, followed by Mr. Schneider, and then finally Mr. Moss. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. I've given a brief overview of your current positions and responsibilities in my introduction, and I'd now like to invite Mr. Mavinga to offer your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Kunz, Ranking Member Flake, and other members of the committee for providing Human Rights Watch with the opportunity to testify on this hearing on Zimbabwe. I would like to request that my statement be submitted for the record.
Without objection.
My name is Dewa Mavinga. I'm a senior researcher with the Africa Division of Human Rights Watch, where I lead our work on Zimbabwe. I frequently travel to Zimbabwe, and last month I met with leaders of the main political parties, media, key civil society groups, church leaders, and business people to assess the human rights conditions ahead of the coming elections. I also maintain daily contact with local activists who keep me informed of the situation in Zimbabwe. Mr. Chairman, my testimony will first lay out the human rights situation in Zimbabwe and then highlight key recommendations for the US government for action to promote a rights-respecting environment leading to credible, transparent, peaceful and elections and political stability thereafter. Many people in Zimbabwe have expectations that the elections will usher in a democratically elected government with interest in addressing the country's long-standing and serious human rights issues. But as things stand, there is a slim chance that Zimbabwe will have free, fair and credible elections, particularly given the shortcomings of security sector reforms and reforms in other sectors. On June 13, President Robert Mugabe used a presidential decree to set July 31 as the election date for harmonized elections. It is critically important that these elections should be held under conditions where Zimbabweans can freely vote for a leadership of their choice. As you may know, on June 15, the leaders of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, urged President Mugabe to approach Zimbabwe's constitutional court to seek extension or delays to elections to allow for much-needed electoral reforms before elections. The government of Zimbabwe has said it does not have funds for elections. Mr. Chairman, during my visit to Zimbabwe last month, people told me of their great fear of the coming elections, that there might just be another cycle of violence because little has changed on the ground. They told me of their despair when they see people responsible for the 2008 violence walking free because the so-called unity government has failed to hold them accountable. Instead of focusing on pulling themselves out of this poverty and rebuilding their lives, they are bracing themselves for further violence and chaos. I had the opportunity to interview the Home Affairs Minister, Teresa Makone of the MDC, who is responsible for the voters' roll, about the ongoing process of updating the voters' roll. And she told me that when she checked for her name, her own name was missing from the roll. After complaining about it in cabinet, she later checked again and found that her name had been removed from the roll. When then she checked for the second time, it had been placed there but spelled incorrectly. The voter registration process and the voters' roll updating process is marred with errors, to what extent deliberate and unclear. A key benchmark for the US government here, as it reconsiders its policy towards Zimbabwe, should be the assessment of whether or not the country is prepared and has held peaceful, transparent, free and fair elections, and also that the government-elect has been able to assume power. Simply basing US policy on the holding of a peaceful referendum on the Constitution, which took place in March, is not enough. On the human rights landscape, Mr. Chairman, there have been some reforms. We now have a new constitution that has been agreed to last month. It is a significant reform, but alone it is not sufficient because of challenges relating to the security sector. A number of new national constitutions have been established, including the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, the Zimbabwe Media Commission, the Anti-Corruption Commission, and the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is not functional because of lack of resources, so it has no capacity to influence positively the human rights environment as we go into elections. The Zimbabwe Media Commission has licensed new newspapers, but there is limited opening of the free airwaves in terms of electronic media, in terms of the radio and televisions. A key challenge for Zimbabwe as we go into elections, which is really crucial to be addressed, is the role that the Zimbabwe state security forces would play, particularly the defense forces, the police, and the Central Intelligence Organization. I would urge, as I turn now to recommendations for the U.S. government, that we request a close collaboration with the Southern African Development Community, SADC, for the U.S. In terms of pushing for free and fair elections. We urge the U.S. government to ensure that before there is consideration for a shift in policy or a review of sanctions, this should be based on whether or not the country has had peaceful elections and whether the government-elect has assumed power. We also urge the Obama administration to work closely with SADC to ensure strict political neutrality on the part of the security forces and to ensure that they refrain from partisan statements supporting one political party over the other. We also urge for urgent reforms to the highly partisan state-controlled print and electronic media. We also urge that there be immediate deployment of domestic and SADC-led international election observers in sufficient numbers to allow for effective monitoring of the situation and to promote credible, free and fair elections in line with the SADC standards. We also urge that the Zimbabwe government should immediately repeal all repressive legislation, including the Access to Information Protection of Privacy Act, the Public Order and Security Act, the Criminal Procedures and Evidence Act, which are hindering freedom of expression for the people of Zimbabwe as they go into election. We urge the U.S. government to provide financial and technical support for a government that comes into power through credible, free and fair elections in a manner that would strengthen democratic state institutions in the areas of promoting the rule of law, democracy, good governance and human rights. Mr. Chairman, my sincere thanks again for this opportunity to address this committee. I'm happy to respond to questions from you or from your colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mavinga. Mr. Schneider, please.
Mr. Chairman.